All right, so I am here today with Dr. Chris Bjorndal. Forgot to
Bjorndal.
double check.
Yeah, it's okay.
Can you
Yeah.
say it again?
Bjorndal.
Bjorndal. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I am excited to bring her work to you. Anybody listening? And I'll just tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to dive right into our chat together. Dr. Christina Bjorndal lives in Alberta, Canada, very close to me, to my home. She's a naturopathic doctor specializing in women's health and mental health. And her focus on mental health is how I found her and the reason why I really wanted to chat with her today. She is the author of Beyond the Label, 10 Steps to Improve Your Mental Health with Naturopathic Medicine. For years, Dr. Chris endured debilitating depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety, and battled bulimia, addiction, and other mental health challenges. And she talks about it in a very real and, I think, brutally honest, just matter-of-fact way, without shame or ego. Like there it is. And I don't hear that voice a lot online. I think it really matters. And so I would love for you afterwards to go check out Dr. Christina's work, and we'll point you in that direction. The devastating low point of her life included attempting to take her own life, and then led to a deep reckoning when she began to take back control of her life. She now offers her training and wisdom with the goal of creating healthy people, not treating disease. But I will just say this because not everybody will know this automatically, that Dr. Christina comes from an integrative or functional health perspective, which means she looks at the whole person, not just one aspect of our body or our existence. And you can ask questions about that if you'd like. So, Dr. Chris, I'm going to go Chris.
Yeah.
I love connecting with women who are doing other work in the world to lift up, not just women, but other messy humans, like people in real people in a real world. And I love to kind of get to know you a little bit better. And so I'm going to ask you a couple questions on a more personal level. So the first one is, what's lighting you up these days?
Yeah, that's right. So for me, I signed up for a year-long training with Gabor Mate, and it's called Compassionate Inquiry. And so that is I'm really enjoying the training I'm getting and the learning that I'm doing, and excited to bring that to my patients as well. So that's what's lighting me up these days.
Wonderful. And yeah, his work, like a lot of the people listening may be familiar with him or may not, but he talks a lot about trauma, right? And about even the mind-body connection and how trauma or pain can manifest in our bodies and our lives if it's not dealt with. And he does such good work.
Yeah, one of his books is When the Body Says No, which is basically this idea that if we've had a big T trauma or a little T trauma, the body is always speaking to us. And so the question, is, are we listening? So I find his work phenomenal, and he's a really wise human being. So I'm really grateful to be mentored by him. Yeah. Not that I'm like mentored as me and, hundreds of other people. It's not this one-on-one relationship, but it's still great to just, be in his knowledge, learning from him. Yeah.
And just, this is a total side note, but also he talks about addiction in Canada and the impact on our prison system, right? Like how many people are in there because of trauma or and the root of addiction, all of that. And it's because it's based in Canada. I really appreciated that because so much of this work and talk is situated elsewhere, and so I love that I've learned so much about Canada through his work.
Yeah. And then that's his other book. I mean, he's got quite a few books, but the other one is that his addiction book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction. Yeah. So I know he's doing phenomenal work for sure.
Well, so are you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Okay, so second question for you. Where are you in progress or being brave by asking for help in your life?
Yeah, so that's a tough one for me to ask for help, but I'm getting much better at it. So I'm still I'm not going to say that I'm great at asking for help, but I'm going to say that I'm learning to lean into that a bit more and reach out for the help that I need. So
Are you
it's
able to give an example of how you're practicing?
how I'm so one area for me is even just with my book and with my work, asking for help and from, say, people who are higher than me, or reaching out to them. So like recently I reached out to two people that I consider out of reach, and they both got back to me. So that's so for me it looks like taking risks and moving into areas that I wouldn't normally move into. And then from a professional standpoint, it's is really just asking for help around, there's just so many articles I want to write and so many things that I want to teach. And so when we were talking earlier, I was mentioning to you that I'm not technologically sound. So even, I know that I would like to be doing perhaps more videos, or whether it's Facebook Lives or YouTube's, that kind of thing. I need to ask for help with respect to that, because that's kind of a little bit of a block for me with the technology side. So, but with respect to my mental health, that has been a big shift in me. I typically, when I fall into a depression, and my friends, I've trained them, and I can speak to this more later if you want, but I'll just mention now that you need to, when you're well, you need to train your support group for the signs to look for when you're not well. And so for me, it's when I'm usually fairly in touch with my close network. And if I stop communicating, that's their red flag that I'm slipping or something's up with me. So then they know to reach out. Yes. And not just once, but several times, because I won't reach back. Yeah. Right. So I've learned, though, as well, to recognize if I am slipping, to ask for help sooner. Before I would fall to the pit, be at the pit, typically attempt suicide. I've attempted 3 times. It ends how it ends. Obviously, I'm still here, but I don't let it get that far anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm with you too. I have a past with depression, suicidality. And I also have learned to be more self-aware, like all the things we're going to talk about: permission to love ourselves, notice, just telling the truth about who and how we are, building good community, and learning how to move against sometimes those natural tendencies to isolate and all of the things that can lead to spiraling, right? Yeah. So I really thank you so much for sharing that. And that leads us really neatly into my very first question, which is, I guess, yeah, it is a question, I guess, but it's this idea that, and I want to use your words. So I forgot to tell people listening what we're actually talking about today. So we're talking about strategies for guarding our mental health and the bravery of asking for help. And so mental health or mental illness, and today we're focusing more, I would say, on mental health, and it's multifactorial. It's not just so there's lots of ways that we care for ourselves well. But Dr. Chris, you write in your book, addressing the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of health is at least as important as addressing the physical aspect, if not more so. And so we're going to focus most of our time on this idea of the emotional, spiritual, mental aspects of health. But you write that, sorry, I'm just skipping through, health is a journey, not a destination. And people have heard that. But if we're talking specifically about mental health, I want to start our conversation today asking you to talk about why this idea of health as a journey, or even we might word it in the way that we're all practicing. We're all practicing, and you just shared, like, if somebody's serving other people, you're still practicing. Why is this critical?
Well, I think for me, so I'm a recovering type A perfectionist person, and I was always focused on the destination. So much so that because of that, I missed the moments. I missed appreciating the little things. I just missed so much because I was always looking to the next thing, and always stuck in the trap of I'll be happy when. So I'll be happy when I graduate from high school. I'll be happy when I graduate from university. I'll be happy when I graduate, or I get that job. It's always out of reach, and it was never within the moment. Never taught me to be present, or no, I was never taught how to be in the moment. It was always about achieving the next goal. And so when we translate this to our health, it's just understanding that things are going to ebb and flow within you. I mean, we're not static beings. We're not lumps of cement. And so there is this flow that happens. And so sometimes you're going to be on a good, we can call it a positive uptick. And sometimes we might be, pulled a little bit back by the waves of life. And that's just life. And to not get super wrapped up on or caught up in, okay, when I reach 150 pounds, I'll be happy. Or, I know for me, I have stumbled so many times with anxiety and depression, and even the eating piece of the puzzle, that I sometimes can find myself saying, why am I here again? Instead of just saying, okay, you're here. Right. So I just feel that understanding, there's a poem that a friend of mine gave to me. It's called The Station. So I was going to read it to you, but I'll just mention it to people, and you can look that up yourself. Read this poem, The Station, and it kind of speaks to, gives you the answer to what I'm talking about. That basically, we're wanting to be enjoying the process of life as we're going through it, not waiting until we really get to a certain point and then wondering.
And also then I can see and hear how and feel for myself how this is also about loving ourselves and seeing ourselves as just a human, in a real world, where so that we don't judge ourselves so harshly when there are hard things that come up. And also for me, it helped alleviate fear. If I found myself in a valley again, I knew, part of my brain knew, this isn't permanent.
Yes.
I can come back up. There's light again. And that helps sustain me when life feels really hard.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of health is a journey and not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about perfectionism. And perfectionism, and a lot of people, interestingly, I talk about it a lot in my work, and not everybody recognizes perfectionism in their lives. They don't know that that's the thing that's keeping them hiding under the covers or in fear. But perfectionism can leave people exhausted, stressed, overwhelmed with chronic headaches, insomnia. It's been linked to mental health issues, including depression, suicidal thinking, anxiety, eating disorders, self-harm, obsessive compulsive disorders. So we need to be talking about perfectionism, don't we, if we're talking about mental health? I would love to just dive right into not the why, because I think if people need more information, I can offer them links or, direct them towards other areas where they can learn. I actually want to move right into how with this is if somebody identifies that perfectionism is loud and bossy in their life or harming them, what are some of the ways that people can learn to break its hold or to start to learn to move through it based on your work and experience?
Well, as part of it, a little bit, in order to get to the how, you do have to just have a quick look at the why, though. So just want to understand that in a lot of cases, perfectionism is a shield that we're using to hide something that we feel we need to hide, or it's there to protect us from some sort of pain that we're not really willing to look at. So in my case, I'm adopted, and so I felt that I had to be this, superwoman from Perfectionville in order to maintain the love in order to maintain the love so that I wouldn't get sent back, so to speak, right? I didn't want to get sent back. And that
so people know you have a loving home, right? You were wanted and all of that, and yet you had these internal struggle happening.
Yeah, and that's because that starts in utero. Right, the mental emotional imprinting happens in utero, and so I had a biological mother that was struggling with the fact that she was pregnant and with an unwanted pregnancy. So there's going to be more cortisol coursing through her veins, and that's going to set me up to have this predisposition to be anxious, which it did. And also I feel that these beliefs got imprinted on me at that time. So even though my parents wanted me, when I was told, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, I apologize, but when I was told I was adopted, I processed that to mean, like, I didn't understand, in my 5-year-old brain, I didn't understand what that word meant. So I processed it to mean that I was with them temporarily. And so that's a kind of a scary place to be as a 5-year-old, right? Never knowing, like, with each ring of the doorbell, is it time for me to go? So in order to, and this isn't all happening on a conscious level, right? For me, this is all happening in the subconscious. So anyways, became an overachiever. And so the how piece always starts with awareness, right? It's always first, because a lot of people don't have the awareness that they are a perfectionist, and it recognize that it serves you in certain, and it serves some function in your life. So it's, first of all, what is that function that it serves for you? And can we take a look at that? So an example that I can give you with a patient who is a perfectionist, and she was always very put together. Like, when she came to see me, like, from head to toe, like, extremely put together. Like, so my challenge with her, I said, I'd like you to wear mismatched socks on when you're at home. Well, that just sent her spiraling. Like, are you kidding me? She was like, I cannot do that, Dr. Chris. I cannot do that. And I said to her, listen, you're not going to get to can by telling yourself you can't. So I said, just try it. We're not there yet. You don't know how you're going to be. Just see where you are at that time. Give it a shot. So anyway, she did the exercise, and it was mind-blowing for her. And it really burst through this barrier that she realized that actually she was okay if she wore mismatched socks, right? She survived that day. So it's just a very, very small example to bring awareness to someone who did not have awareness about how they could function. She thought she could not function if she didn't have matching socks on. So it would, for me to give people examples, it's almost easier, to have that one-on-one example. But I would say, really, just start by looking at areas of your life where you might feel like you have to have that sort of sense of control, where you might feel like it's a little unmanageable for you if you don't do A, B, C, or D, and see if you can lean in a little bit to just being okay with being a little bit uncomfortable. Like, a lot of times I say to my patients, especially with anxiety, we have to get you comfortable with being uncomfortable so that we can get you to be comfortable. And a lot of people are stuck in that place of, I don't want to feel discomfort. And it's all about feeling whatever it is that you're feeling in the moment, and trusting that you and your mind, your body, your spirit is not going to fail you in that moment. So it takes time to get there, but it's a process, right? It's a process.
Yeah, I call myself a recovering perfectionist, and loosening, like, learning to loosen our grip on little things and see that we're still safe.
Yeah.
We're still okay. The world is okay. Like, it's hard work. It's not easy work at all. And I love that, again, if we go back to that idea of, like, this is a process, we're all practicing, I think that can alleviate some of the panic too. It's like, it's okay that this takes time. It's okay. We just, in little step by little step, it's amazing how much we really can relax and learn to be okay with, or even to be able to sit in discomfort, like you were saying, and even to identify the stories around why we need to order our world.
That's right. And just to understand, like, and I'll give you an example, well, sort of two little examples. Number one, like, we can just use cleaning the house as an example. So say you're the type of person that cleans your bathrooms every 3 days. So one way to move into being okay with being a little uncomfortable is to maybe clean your bathroom every 4 days, right? Or then move to every 5, or whatever feels, right for you. But I can tell you, when I decided to make this career change, and because I wasn't always a naturopathic doctor, so when I made this career change and decided to go back to, I had to go back, well, first to high school, then university, and then to naturopathic school. One of my friends that I did my undergrad with, and I was very sick in my undergrad, during my undergrad, he kind of called me, came, had this one-on-one chat with me, a little fireside, heart to heart. And he's like, you know what, Chris, I actually don't think you should do this. I don't think you should go back to school. And I was like, well, why? Like, what? First of all, I'm thinking, what's it to you? But second of all, I'm like, why? And he said, because I watched you just about literally run yourself into the ground and basically almost kill yourself in the process to be the best student in our undergrad, that I just don't think is worth it. And he's the one that gave me that poem, actually, The Station.
That's a brave friend.
Yeah, very. And so so he said to me, I know school hasn't changed. So unless you've changed, I don't think this is a good idea. So tell me how you've changed. And it's like I had to pitch to him how I'd grown or how I'd evolved in the 15 years that since graduating from my undergrad. So why did I tell you that? Oh, because he's right. There's no way I would have survived if I was the same perfectionist that I was back in my, from age 18 to 22, in that people-pleasing stage of my life. So anyways, it's just, it was really important, because I had to let go of, not that I let go of my standards, but I had to let go of wanting to be the best and shift to, I just need to do the best I can. And
I
it's a huge
talk a
shift.
lot about lowering the bar, because I raise my family tells me, my kids, my husband, they know, they do it gently and lovingly, but it's like, I just raise the bar all the time without realizing it. And then I'm like, oh, I've done it again, bring it on back. And so one of the ways that I encourage people sometimes, because I'm working in the online space, is like, just hit publish on that imperfect article, that blog post, that little thing, because it's like, and practicing, like, it's even okay if there's like a grammatical error or a spelling mistake. The world will not stop turning, even if some people criticize you, because they will.
Yeah, yes, they will. But that's okay.
It is okay.
That's okay. Yeah, and the world needs to learn to not criticize for things like that, because it's so not worth it.
Yeah, and you can sure see that I can chuckle about it now, but not in a mean way, but just see, oh, perfectionism is like loud in your life because you're criticizing this thing, which, doesn't matter. But
yes.
Okay, so I would love to move on into the idea of, you talk about shadow beliefs, core beliefs and shadow beliefs.
Yeah.
I haven't really heard many people talk about shadow beliefs per se, except in an area, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. Like, there's some sort of,
yes, a little bit.
Yeah, but so would you mind talking to us, like, I know it's a big topic, but could you introduce the idea of shadow beliefs for us? And then maybe some ideas about how we can begin uncovering our shadow beliefs, which I know you talk about how we can't do this work if we don't first have the awareness.
Right.
Right. But this has to be brief, obviously. So, but if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so a lot of people are aware of the term core beliefs, and those are usually in our conscious mind. So I can, I have a core belief that I wasn't wanted, for example. Doesn't mean our core beliefs are true, but we create a story around them, and then we operate in the world as a result of this driver. Then we can have, so core beliefs, and they can also be, another word is limiting beliefs sometimes is another word for that. But then we have what's called shadow beliefs or unconscious commitments. And this is the subconscious mind. This is what's driving a lot of the behavior. So you want to understand that. So whenever you point the finger at somebody, there's three pointing back at you. And those three fingers pointing back at you could be pointing to what's this idea of shadow beliefs. So when we point the finger and we say, I don't like deceit, and I don't like that person lies, we're disowning the fact that we might lie, and this can be the shadow. So it's this part of ourselves that we don't like to look at. It remains sort of hidden in the background, but is within us, and it can also be limiting us in our lives, in the sense that the way it shows up is if we say we want something but then we never do it, you can be pretty dang sure it's because there's an unconscious commitment or a shadow belief running the show. So an example of this I can give you, say, from my life is I was in this corporate job for a long time, and I was always saying, I want to leave my job, I want to leave my job, but I would never leave my job. And the reason was I didn't want to risk rejection looking for another job. So I would rather endure the conditions I was enduring, which in my job, the sort of soul-sucking job, than risk rejection, because that was too big of a threat for me. So the way it can look for somebody else is, say you want to lose weight, for example, but then you're always self-sabotaging. That means there's a belief in the background that is sort of playing this dominant role, but we're not aware of it. Mm-hmm. So basically, whenever you say you want something or you want to make a change in your life, then you're not able to make the change, mm-hmm. It's usually because there's a shadow belief or this idea of an unconscious commitment in the background. And it takes working with someone to understand this. So I worked with a woman named Nancy Levin, Debbie Ford, who has passed away, but she's written a book called The Shadow Effect. And so, I mean, any therapist is aware usually of this and can help guide people through it. But it's also for me, with my mental health conditions, I had created shadow issues around bipolar disorder. So I kept that hidden, and I lived in a lot of shame with that. And it wasn't really until I, recognized the fears I had around that I was these sort of shadow beliefs, that I was able to move through those and be able to put the work out into the world that I have. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that makes sense. If people have my book, it's discussed in around page 220, 221.
Yeah. And actually, I do want to just, remind people that you can see Dr. Chris's book behind her, and I have it. It's a fabulous book. And I do recommend that if you want to look at sort of lifestyle, like she goes into things like around sleep and our environment and nutrition, but also the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of mental health. Like, she does a deep dive. It's a very good book, and I do recommend that you check it out.
Yeah.
And I'll put a link in the, when I upload the video, I'll share a link with you to try to make it easier for you.
Yeah.
So did you have anything else that you want to say about how people could begin? Like, do you think it's just automatically best to go work with somebody? But we all know that there's people who can't. Like, there are just reasons why people can't always in the season or whatever. Are there ways that you think are safe and healthy and people can begin to do this work of identifying shadow beliefs and then moving through them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just read this part to you, because this is something that Nancy taught to me, and I didn't, I don't have it memorized. But basically, she says our unconscious. So whenever we say we want something, but then we don't do it. Why? Why is that? So it is because of our unconscious commitment. So she says we may tell ourselves that we're committed to our own happiness, but deep down we're actually committed to something else, like being indispensable, staying safe, or putting people's needs ahead of our own. And these unconscious commitments are often formed in childhood in reaction to some event or circumstance. So we make a promise to ourselves that we're never going to be hurt, that we're never going to be alone, we're never going to be unsafe. But here we are several years later, maybe 5, 10, 20, 30, sometimes 50 years later, still keeping a promise to ourselves that we forgot that we made. Mm-hmm. So again, some of us are committed to being, she talks about being committed to being punished in some way. And some of these tenacious childhood beliefs keep us thinking that we deserve punishment. So Debbie Ford, in her book, another book of hers, she writes, our outer world reflects our inner commitments. So if we want to know what we're committed to, all we have to do is look at our lives. So we are, whether we are aware of it or not, always creating exactly what we're most committed to. And by examining what we have and what we don't have, you'll be able to uncover these unconscious commitments and see what you're truly committed to. And when our lives are not the way we want them to be, we can be certain that we have a conflicting hidden, underlying, or unconscious commitment to something other than we say what we are committed to. So that's where people need to start. Just look at what you say you're committed to. So you could be committed. So, and it can, again, it can be, like for me, I was really committed. I really did want to quit my job, but I never did. Right. I mean, eventually I did. So look at what you say it is you want to change in your life, or you're committed to, and then look at what you actually do. And therein lies the gap. And then once you have that awareness of the gap, then you can work at closing that gap, or figuring out, okay, well, why do I have this gap? Why do I say I want to do this and I want to do X, but I do Y? Then you can look at that. You just got to keep, for me, journaling has been one of the biggest tools and gifts of that. I think it's the best thing since, I think it's better than any kind of therapy, but it's so helpful. It's just been so helpful for me. But I think it's just a lost art now, or not. It's not even an art, but it's a lost practice just with technology. So,
well, since I have seasonal mindfulness journals available.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So get those. Yeah, and I created a journal too, right? But people need to be journaling. So.
So we didn't plan on talking about this, but I'm curious. There are different forms of journaling that we can do. And do you use it as a free form writing where you try to just like let it come and not judge it in the moment and just like, and then you see what comes out of you? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's evolved over the years, but I think for me at first it was, I was an over-analyzer, right? And so I would really, and I'm a very sensitive person, so I would be, say I had a meeting, well then I would be, after the meeting, I would be processing the meeting and thinking about, oh, well, they looked at me this way, what did they mean? And I just drive myself totally batty with just this chatter. So the journaling really helped me. That's where I processed a lot of it. So initially it was legible, but now it's really just not that legible. It's just a place for me to dump. And at nighttime, it helps me to shut my mind off. It's like I close that, I dump on the page and I close that book. It's like my mind has just basically set aside everything and it can rest and I can fall asleep. And I was into for a while Julia Cameron's work and doing morning pages. I fell out of that, but that is another practice people can do. I think there's no right or wrong. I think it's just a matter of starting with whatever feels comfortable for you. I know a lot of patients say to me, oh, I don't want anyone to read it. So then I say, well, it doesn't have to be legible, right? It's just this unconscious free flow of whatever's weighing on you. Yeah. Other times patients say to me, well, I don't know what I would say. Well, then start with that. I don't know what to say. I guarantee you, your conscious mind, your subconscious mind has got something to say.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, at least in this day and age, feel this real resistance to we think we can do this all in our minds.
Yeah.
And it's like, if that worked, you wouldn't we'd all be healed and free. So it's like we don't even know what's inside our hearts and minds so much of the time. We have to get it out and in a place where we can see it, or just even sometimes just the process of blah. And I think that's why therapy, or having a good friend who judgment free, we can just they don't hold it against you if you're sharing all this just real, and just a safe space to get it out of you. And so I think use journaling, go to therapy, use what you need to get this stuff out of you.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to move on. The World Health Organization says that 25% of the world population, people from all walks of life, and I think this is really important to emphasize, will be affected by mental health issues. And I think the stat from 2009 in Canada was 1 in 5 people, but probably over the last decade that has gone right. So a lot of us, honestly, this could be one person in every family. This means it
is pretty much one person in every family. Yeah.
Yeah. This means this is part of the reality of this life, but there's very little openness still about this. And we still judge it, and people assume that you've done something wrong. There's there's blaming of the person who's suffering, there's blaming of the parents, there's blaming of the school system, there's all this blaming, but then all we're doing is blanketing people and suppressing and hiding. And yet, if it's so common, this is part of common humanity that Kristen Neff, who's a self-compassion teacher, and she talks about this, that part of self-compassion is just common humanity. Here I am, a real human in a messy world. We need, like, shame kills people. Shame sucks the joy out of life. Shame literally kills people. And yet we're still not actually, I think, not doing a great job yet of removing shame from this conversation.
No, we're not.
This is a big question. If somebody is under shame, how can they even begin? I'm handing you over this impossible question that you have to resolve now in 30 seconds. If somebody is experiencing shame, they may love somebody too, but they can't tell somebody else's story. Like, it's like, we have to start with us, I think. How can we begin to practice even lifting the shame or changing or thinking about it? Like, could you even have any advice? Because this is so big.
Yeah. So I think I'll just speak from the perspective of the person who's carrying the shame, because that's what I understand, because I carried so much shame. Now I'll probably start to cry. So, like, when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, what I did with that is and so people understand, this is type 1 as well. So this is the one that has psychosis. So I pretty much shoved that as far away from me as possible, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And also my doctor told me, and this is when I was working in the corporate world, he told me, don't tell anybody about this. And he wasn't saying that, I think, to create shame, which is what it did, but that's my own process. But what he was doing was trying to protect me, because there was not a lot of understanding about bipolar disorder, and an issue with mania or hypomania is a lot of financial spending that can happen, and people can end up bankrupt as a result of that. And so he didn't want me to be at risk in this position I was having at the bank, anyway. So, but I interpreted that to mean, I've got a dark mark. This is something that's bad. This is something that should never be spoken about. And until you shine the light of love on these aspects of yourself that you don't like, love, or accept, you will remain in shame. And so I think the solution for shame is love. I think the solution for shame is self-compassion. It's not easy to get there sometimes, but it takes somebody mirroring to you that you're okay. You know? It's so hard for me not to cry, because it's such a big wound, right? Like, I'll tell you, I mean, this is probably something maybe a normal people, and I'm just gonna go off on a tangent here with the normal. I really think that's a disservice that we do to sufferers when we say you're not normal. I mean, I get it, like, I totally get it, but what I want, like I talk about in my book, if we draw a graph, and at the bottom of that graph is panic attacks and suicide, and at the top of that graph is mania and psychosis, and then somewhere in the middle is this band that we call normal. You just want to understand that society wants us kept in this normal range, and the only reason is because they're uncomfortable with the extremes. But if you lie in the extremes, and I've lied in both ends of those extremes, the only thing I wanted, the only thing that would that helped me in those extreme states was love, reflected back at me from my mom and my dad, or whoever happened to be dealing with me, whether it was a police officer or an ambulance attendant or whoever, I mean, I've been through a lot. People would be shocked if they knew what I've been through. I've been in jail because of my mental health. So why am I going on that tangent? I just feel that until you make people understand that they're okay, that this is the common human condition. Yeah. And some of us struggle more than others. And that's just because we vibrate at a different level, perhaps. We feel at a different level, perhaps. Who's to say? But you're not, I don't, honestly, the only, and I'm even going to put a caveat on that. I was going to say the only mental health condition that I think is actually a true mental health condition is schizophrenia. But I'm actually going to take that back. I don't even think that. With every schizophrenia patient I've worked with, there's been a huge trauma that has split them.
Mm.
And I wonder, if they didn't have that trauma, what would have happened? And if that trauma had been dealt with properly, would they have gone into this psychotic state and remained there? So
I think
autism is another story. I mean, autism is another piece, a different story, but I won't go there. Sorry, what were you going to say?
so. I think one important component of removing shame is each of us, like if we're in a position where we're safe and healthy enough to be able to use our voice, or like, we are, because safety matters, and not everybody is in a safe environment, but those of us who can begin talking openly, loving ourselves well. Like
I mean,
I
that's the
love
start.
myself well. I see all my messiness as a human, but now I know, after years of work, right, that does not disqualify me from a good life, from love, from friendship, from anything. It just means I also need support. I'm this human who doesn't belong in a vacuum. We belong to each other, and we all will struggle. And this is, and in different ways, just because we're in this world, like, and this idea that we're allowed to be human, we're allowed to need each other, we're allowed to need support, and then so I think that's an important starting place. But for somebody who's not there yet, I guess, that sounds way too big.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, as we've been chatting and I've been listening to you, I even forget if we did even just offer, I think you did, where can we begin? Yeah, self-compassion, right? You said self-compassion is the starting place, I guess, practicing.
Yeah. And so I think, I mean, so for me, what ended up happening, I mean, so I'm 53. I was initially diagnosed when I was 20. So it's been 33 years. I really have only just come out of the closet. I feel like I'm, because I have just come out of the closet in the last 2 years about the bipolar piece. I was out about suicide and depression, anxiety, and bulimia, but I was not out about bipolar disorder, and that was because I feared people judging me. I feared, well, no one's going to go and see her in practice because she's, all these words that I don't like to use. So it's taken me a long time to get to this point where I talk openly about having this condition. And ironically enough, it's been through the process of writing the book that I feel that I've been the most stable from a mental health perspective, because it was a healing journey for me to be able to be continually turning to this place of saying that, hey, you're okay. But one of the points I wanted to make was the really turning point for me was when I did attempt suicide, and I was left with I was in a coma, and I was left on dialysis with kidney failure and told I would need a kidney transplant, and I was not happy when I opened my eyes, right? I was so pissed off that I was still here, and I don't mean to speak disrespectfully, but I really was not happy. So a friend gave me a book to read by Marianne Williamson, A Return to Love. And there's a quote on surrender. So I think this is where people need to start with looking at helping themselves with dealing with shame. So for me, this quote helped me. So surrender is not about breaking out of anything. It's a gentle melting into who you really are. And we let down our armor, and we discover that all that God needs is just one sincere, surrendered moment where love matters more than anything, and nothing else really matters at all. And so the key word in that, for me, two key words, one was surrender and the other was love. Obviously, I didn't love myself at all. I was at war with myself. Mm-hmm. And so everyone has to reach their own, I think, crisis point. And some people don't, some people do not survive. They don't. And some people do. And so I think, that's a whole other conversation as to why that is. But I think just understand that you have to figure out for yourself how you can learn to lean in to these parts of you that you're hiding or you feel shameful about, and just understand. I know it's easy for me to say sitting here, there is nothing to be ashamed of. There really isn't. So just do your best and find someone that can help you. And I just started with reading a lot of books along those lines, like self-help books is what I started with, and just learning about, well, how do you love and accept yourself? Where do you even start with that? So that's kind of where it started for me, and just keep paying attention to how you're talking to yourself in your head, right? If you're beating yourself up and you've got this inner critic that has the stage, like, then that's a place to start. Start booting that person off the stage and finding something a little bit kinder to say about yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Years ago, I instituted a no bullying policy, which meant I decided one day, actually, when my now 14-year-old was born, and I held her, and I'd struggled so long with like disordered eating and shame around my mental health ups and downs and just lots of things. And I remember that day deciding, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore for her sake and mine. And I made this decision, and I had to still practice it every single day or like hour by hour. But I just decided like a no bullying policy. So I wasn't allowed anymore to speak to myself in this horrible way.
Nice.
And that was a good, healthy thing. It felt concrete. I could do that. I could do this in practice. So
yeah, and I think what you want to understand is you're with you longer than anyone is going to be with you. Right? You're with you longer than you're with your parents or your spouse or your children. You're with you. So how is that relationship going?
Yeah.
Right?
And that leads me, like, I would love 8 hours with you. And
we can do that, but just not today. I haven't got any of my shopping done, so I'm in a little bit of a tight spot.
So we're gonna
I hate malls, so there you go. How am I going to do that? That's why I guess I can do online shopping. Anyway, sorry, just digress.
So, but I do want to at least touch on this idea that you point out, and I've shared it in my membership recently. We're talking about mental health this month, and this idea that you say ultimately it's our feelings about ourselves and how we treat ourselves that are critical to our mental health and well-being. And I have experienced this in my family, my life, with clients and women I love, that we can try to affirm each other. We can pour out for each other. We can love the other person, approve of them, and adore them. And if they do not love themselves, if they cannot begin in some manner, like to offer themselves that, then we can't fill them up.
Okay.
And we can try, though, like relationship matters and belonging matters. But some people listening might have been trying to find approval and acceptance and belonging and all of this outside of themselves for a long time. And we're going to always come back to this place where we have to offer it to ourselves. And Byron Katie says, and you'll know this, but it's not your job to love me, it's mine, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that resonates too. It's like we do need each other, and also we need to be practicing this work for ourselves, right?
That's right.
So
absolutely.
I think we just need to wrap up, even though there's so many questions I still want to ask, but I do want to just say this. Again, her book, Dr. Chris's book, is a great place. So if you need strategies for sleep and stress management, for instance, for nutrition, for understanding why does gut health matter. Maybe you're hearing a lot about gut health online and you really need to understand why should you care about this if you need to protect your mental health. Her book is just a great place to get that information, and then you can reach out to her and talk to her about working more in depth if you need that help. So actually, I'm just gonna have my phone's ringing in the background. I think do you have anything else that you came into this chat feeling like you really want people to know?
Yeah, I think what I would say is just we want to make sure that we just know that you just want to start somewhere,
Right.
right? So if you want to show up differently tomorrow, if you want to have a different experience tomorrow, you got to show up differently, right? You got to do something differently, and you don't have to do everything differently, right? All at once, but just start with one thing,
Right.
right? And I talk about 10 steps in the book, and really the most important step, I think, of all of them is this learning how to love and accept yourself piece of the puzzle. Because I know for me, and that we started this conversation off with that, where you quoted, where you said that I said, looking at the mental, emotional, spiritual aspects of health or your life is just as important, if not more important, than the physical. And the reason that is I start, and most people start with that physical level, right? You might start with an antidepressant or anti-anxiolytic, or you might see a naturopath and they might start you on the nutraceuticals to support you. And that took me so far, but eventually I bumped up against my thoughts and my core beliefs and my shadow beliefs and this basic premise that I didn't love and accept myself. And so to me, we need to kind of reverse things, and we need to, I'm not saying diet isn't important. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that it's all important, but the foundation of it is this love piece, and then build the pyramid from there. So, and I guess the only other thing I want to say is, if you're listening to this and you're struggling, or someone that's struggling, please share this with them and understand that there are solutions. There are people who want to help. I'm one of them. Chris is another one, and there's lots of people that are there. We're resources, and we want to help you. And it's sometimes hard to reach out for help. I get it, but you got to start somewhere somehow. So that's all I'll say, because I have lots to say.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like I haven't even asked you like a fifth of the questions that I had planned, and also it's brave to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's brave to show up human in this world. It's brave to just be messy and let somebody love you. It's brave to practice loving yourself in the middle of whatever it is that you're going through. And I so want to end also by urging you to say, Dr. Chris has needed help. She's shared some of it. I have needed help. Right now I need help. I'm reaching out to friends, and we need each other. And there's no shame at all in needing each other. And in fact, I think it's one of the most, even though it's challenging to us, it's one of the most beautiful parts of this life, is this idea that we lift each other up in turn.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I'll just say on that note, I know we have to wrap up, but I just will say, I have a blog article. I think it's on my Natural Train site, or maybe it's on my Dr. Chris site, but basically friends are good for the soul. And I have this one friend the one that gave me that book to read, but also that was in 94, but way back in 1987, she made an appointment for herself to go to the UBC Student Services and talk to the doctor there, because she was concerned about me. And the advice she was given, it's so emotional. She was given the advice to make an appointment for me to go. And so that's what she did. And she took a huge risk, because I could have gotten upset with her and what are you doing? Were you making a doctor's appointment for me? What, but I consider her like a soul sister, because if it wasn't for Lisa, honestly, I really don't know what my path, the journey may have gone a totally different direction. So you as a friend, you can do that for someone else, what she did for me. I've never heard of anyone doing that for a friend, making an appointment for them to see a doctor because they were so scared about what they saw in their friend. So that's an example of how you can help somebody if you're someone who's concerned about somebody in your life. So I won't say anything more, I promise.
Thank you. I'm just really grateful for your work and how real you are, and for coming out of the closet and your story as much as your work. I think it really, really matters. So I'm grateful that you're doing that, and you're being a light in the world where we really do need more of that. I think it can save lives. So I'm grateful. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.